For those of you in line, please come forward and let the family acknowledge your presence. We're grateful that you came out, and once again, for those of you who are online, we appreciate you joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Jeffrey Weil from Ezra Habonim, the Niles Township Jewish Congregation, will be officiating. There's a speaker right here. In just a moment, he's going to approach the family to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya. At this time, I ask the immediate family, for those of you in the first row, to please rise.
The four mourners are wearing the Kriya ribbons. Mark, Neil, Rena, and Larry have the Kriya ribbons. Kriya means tearing. In the Bible, our forebears, when something calamitous happened or something very sad or shocking would happen, they would tear their garments as a sign of their emotional distress, really as a sign of their exposed and wounded hearts. And the blessing that we say, which you'll repeat after me in a moment, acknowledges God as the judge of truth, or the true judge. And that's sometimes difficult for us to acknowledge or accept, that God is a true judge, particularly during times of loss or tragedy and so forth. And yet our tradition wants us to understand God in that way, despite the challenges that life brings. And so for the four children of Marcia Klaber, please recite this blessing after me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. Amen. You said, "Blessed are you, eternal God, ruler of the universe, the judge of truth." Adonai, ma Adam v'teda'ehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu. Adam lehevel dama. Yamav ketzel over b'boker tzitz v'chalaf le'erev, Yimalel v'yavesh. Tashev enosh ad dalka v'tomer shuvu v'nei adam. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you would even be mindful of us? All of us are just a breath. Our days are a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning it shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening of all of our lives, the grass withers and fades. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu b'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise. Would that we understood whither we go from here, for when we die we carry nothing with us, not our riches, not our glory. But God, you say, Shmor tam urei yashar, mark the wholehearted. Behold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find ultimate peace. Today we gather to remember one who was tam v'yashar. She was wholehearted. She was upright. She was loving and devoted and strong. She had a gutta neshama. Marcia Klaber. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'atzat rasha'im, u'v'derech hata'im lo amad, u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav, ki'im Torat Adonai chevtzo. This psalm says, happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the Torat Adonai, the Torah and the instruction of God, is their delight. That describes Marcia. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in season. Its foliage never fades. Its fruit always flourishes. Our sacred tradition has something to say for us, passages for us, for all the moments of our lives, the times of joy, and may we experience mostly smachot, but life also has times of sadness. And the 23rd Psalm, which you have in the inside of your handout, we will read together in a moment. I'll read it in Hebrew first, and then we'll read it together in English. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot desha yarbitzeni al mei minuchot yinahleni nafshi yishovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek l'ma'an shemo, gam ki elech b'geit samavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha mishantecha hema yinachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yurdafuni kol yemei chaya, v'shavti b'veit Adonai la'orach yamim. Together, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Eshet Chayil mi yimtza. We know the beginning of that. That's the Eshet Chayil from Proverbs. It begins kind of cynically. Eshet Chayil mi yimtza. It's a question of a woman of valor. Who can find such a one? It's like saying that you're searching for a heart of gold, and you're growing old, searching for that heart of gold. But when you think about Marcia Klaber, you think about the Eshet Chayil and what it says. Mi yimtza. Who found such a one? Well, Herbert, her husband, found such a one. You all, her children, found such a one. And Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Eshet Chayil mi yimtza. A woman of valor, who can find? She is more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need. She is clothed in strength and dignity. She faces the future cheerfully, with strength. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. Rabot banut asu chayil. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel over them all. And then there's the third chapter of Ecclesiastes, or we say Kohelet, which is familiar. Lakol zman ve'et lachol chefetz tachat hashemayim. For everything there's a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time when we must refrain from our embraces, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time to speak. And so this is a time for speaking. I like, though, in those verses how it talks about a time for laughter, because this is a family that enjoys laughter, a time for dancing. This is a family that enjoys dancing as well, and much more. But those verses from Ecclesiastes talk about how everything does have its time, the happy times and the sad times, that everything has a plan, even if it's beyond our comprehension. So, a time to speak about Marcia. You might review the life of Marcia Klaber, and you might see the following things. You might note her dedication to Judaism, to the Jewish people. You might note her control over her household and family. You might, of course, acknowledge her love for her children, her husband, her grandchildren. You might see in the biopic of Marcia's life, if anybody were to make such a movie, and why not? You might see the Friday night dinners in the building. You might take special note at the end of those dinners of Marcia and her expression of tremendous pride, looking around at her husband, her children, her sisters, and their families. You might consider Marcia's life and see this quintessential balabusta. And you might remark on her love of chazanut, of cantorial music, her fondness of rabbis, her love of shul, and you might see her as this pious woman. You might consider this woman who depended upon her husband and others to get around because she didn't drive, including to her job in her own neighborhood at Jewish Family Services. And you might draw the conclusion that she was a cautious woman, which she was, content to remain within familiar confines. And all that would be accurate if that's the picture that you come up with of Marcia Klaber's life. It paints a reasonable portrait of Marcia. But it is not complete. Marcia was all that, yes, and she was a whole lot more as well. Pious, yes. Faithful, yes. Mischievous, yes. Loving of family, absolutely. There's no question about that. And yet also sparing with her PDAs, public displays of affection, and sparing in her praise because she didn't want her kids to get big heads. A shul goer, yes, walking to Ner Tamid on Shabbat to hear Torah and hear Chazanut, but also spending Shabbat afternoons listening to opera in bed. A great cook for her family with those delicious improvised dishes. She rarely used recipes, but she'd also sneak a cigarette on occasion. Supportive, yes, wanting to be supportive, but also she told you exactly what she thought. We'll get to more of that in a little bit. Judaism and family, I would say maybe family and Judaism above all, but she also watched football. This I didn't realize until we talked the other day, and she enjoyed seeing those athletic specimens in their uniforms. I won't say specifically what she was focusing on, but a certain Matt Forte comes to mind. This is what was really so appealing about Marcia Klaber, really. She was very much 100% Marcia, her unique self. Jewish tradition says that we all have a unique self, and it's a blessing, our unique personalities. It's a gift from God. It is the loss of Marcia's unique self that we mourn today. She was born to parents Anna and Leon Becker just 90 years ago. Younger sister to Irene, Gicky, and Esther. Another sister, Blanche, tragically died before Marcia was born. The family rabbi told Leon to help Anna, the grieving mother, of course Leon was grieving too, I'm sure, after Blanche died, to overcome her sadness by having another child quickly. That is really not advice that we would offer today. But it is nonetheless fitting that Marcia came into the world as a result of rabbinic advice, truly, for she was always so deeply devoted to shul life and to Judaism, so that makes some sense. Having experienced the loss of their 2-year-old, their 2-year-old daughter Blanche, Leon and Anna raised Marcia with a certain degree of cautiousness, like trepidation. She didn't learn to ride a bike, for instance, and Marcia incorporated that cautiousness into her own character throughout the years. She was aware of it. It was part of who she was. And by the way, Cora, the family wants me to mention Cora, who helped to raise Marcia as a kid, was part of the family then and into the next generation as well. Marcia grew up. She went to Sen High School. Her sisters, older sisters, started their lives. They married and created families, individual families which later would unite into one big family, the kibbutz, or a kibbutz-like kind of situation. And that included Label and Joe and Marvin, and then Bluma and Herschel and Linda. And Bluma, we have Bluma East and Bluma West, and Sari and Julie and Gail. Marcia was a beautiful young woman with a radiant smile. And one day, a friend, Larry Shelton, introduced her to this man, Herbert Klaber, and Marcia Becker became Marcia Klaber. For 6 decades, she was an extraordinarily devoted wife. A portrait of her at just 20 years old, which I saw yesterday, reveals her beauty and her love. It's a portrait that she signed for Herbie. She signed it referring to Herbie as my darling. Just as Marcia was one of 4, she and Herbie had their own 4, Mark, Neil, Rena, and Larry. They lived ultimately on the 3rd floor of the building, above the families of Irene and Gicky. Esther and her family lived not far away. Life revolved around family. Shul, Shabbat dinners, happy traditions. The Klabers on the 3rd floor, they were not wealthy. I mean, Herbie had a good, solid, steady job. They didn't have the best of everything, but as Rena said, they made the best of everything. They really had what matters in life. On Friday nights, Marcia, as I mentioned, a great cook, would survey the table, sort of like at the end of dinner, or maybe it was coffee and at the end of the evening, she would sit down and she would survey the table, and she had an expression of complete satisfaction. Perhaps she was thinking, these are my people, my sisters and their families. These are my children. This is what my darling and I have created. The banter around that table was, and this is no surprise if you know the family now, was full of noise, laughter, talk of current events. We can all imagine that happy noise in this large, extended family. And upstairs, when the families were separated and it was just the 6 Klabers in their home on the 3rd floor, there was laughter, there was chatter, there was bickering. Marcia went from being a Becker to a bickerer of sorts. She and Herbie did bicker, but don't let that mislead you about their relationship. Their kisses in the morning and their kisses in the evening when he came home illustrated their devotion to each other. And the laughter that their children, that Mark, Neil, Rena, and Larry might hear coming from their parents' bedroom was a sign, they were probably just watching TV. It was a sign, if nothing else, that their parents truly loved each other. Growing up in the building was a special communal experience, more typical really of a previous generation. All those cousins were raised, it seems, by a village, or like within a kibbutz kind of thing. When either one of the four Klabers would come home late at night, Mark, Neil, Rena, or Larry, they'd come home, and as they hustled up to the third floor, the creaking staircase in the building would give them away. It would betray them, and it's like, as they described it, they had to pass through multiple gates. An ant sticking out her head in the first floor, okay, you're home. More steps, an ant sticking out her head in the second floor, okay, you're home. And of course, Marcia had been waiting up too. They had seen her silhouette in the window sitting on that stool as they approached the building, coming home at whatever, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. But by the time they made it upstairs, Marcia had already scuttled into her room. But she was waiting up. She was definitely a worrier, but that worry and the cautiousness with which she raised her children, you could see it, as Neil described it, as like a protecting aura, protective shield over her family. And I think about Miriam's well. Miriam of Torah died in our Torah readings a couple of weeks ago, and Miriam's well, this miraculous well, according to the Midrash, followed the Israelites throughout the desert, sustaining them with water. And perhaps you could think of Marcia's cautiousness as just an expression of the love that sustained her family over the decades. Marcia was no doubt extremely proud of this family, extremely proud of her children, but she was not a gushingly boastful kind of mom. She wouldn't make a big deal of things. She wouldn't go on and on about their accomplishments, and there were and are accomplishments, but she would shrug it off with an admonition not to let this stuff go to their heads. And while she might not have been verbally supportive or overly affectionate, she obviously cared. She certainly cared enough to have opinions and to express her opinions, and she had many of those. If she disapproved of something, she might shake her finger or give you a dismissive wave of her hand or simply say, "I don't like your hair," or "put on your lipstick," or something like that. Her daughters-in-law and grandchildren experienced this too. Marcia and Herbie delighted as the family expanded over the years, to include Arleen and Liz and Lisa, and of course the grandchildren, Josh and Elijah, Arianna and Daniel, Max, Jeremy, and Zach. When I would visit your grandmother, we would look at the family pictures, and we'd especially look at the pictures of the grandchildren on the wall above her bed. About you, maybe she wouldn't speak so glowingly about her children all the time, but about you, she would boast. Even though she could be that stern bubbie as she was, wanting you to quit playing when you were out at the house for a dinner or whatever it was, and you were playing somewhere else, she'd be stern and she'd want you to quit playing and come back to the table. If Bobby came in, you knew that you'd be marching back in promptly. If she sent Zadie to get you, you had a chance of hanging around a little bit more and playing some more. But if Bobby came in, you were marching right back in there. Speaking of your Zadie, you lost him 9 years ago. Your Zadie, your father-in-law. It was a tough loss, a sad loss. Marcia had been an extraordinarily devoted wife to Herbie, particularly through his serious medical issues. And wherever he was, nursing home, hospital, whatever, even though she didn't drive, she found a way to be with him daily. And Marcia, too, struggled with health issues. A double knee replacement, she figured may as well just get both of them done at the same time. Diabetes, cancer, COVID. But she was a stark ben Issen. She was strong as steel. And maybe she'd expressed herself during these times with her trademark shrug that perhaps said, "What can you do? You must be moving on. You must move on." And she did move on. We all, though, have our time. And as Marcia's time, its 9 decades, neared its end, recently, she had the opportunity to be surrounded by family. She could not speak well at this point. I saw this a couple days ago as well. But when surrounded by her children, she said it all. While she had not been a demonstrably affectionate mother, but at this time, she would take the hands of her loved ones and bring those hands to her cheek. Not a word needed to be spoken. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, or Chapters of the Fathers, the sage Ben Zoma asked a question. Ezehu Ashir, who is the rich one? Who is the one who is wealthy? And Ben Zoma answered his own question. The one who is wealthy, the one who is rich, is Hasovea Bechelko, the one who is satisfied with his or her lot or portion in life. And Marcia Klaber had every reason to be satisfied with her portion in life. And she was. For she had an abundance. Abundant dedication to the Jewish people, and that is satisfying. Abundant faith, and that is satisfying. Abundance in her relationship, her loving relationship for 6 decades with Herbie, that is satisfying. Abundance in the love of her family, and that is satisfying. Abundant opinions, yes. Mostly ahava rabbah, abundant love. Zichronah livracha, may Marcia Klaber's memory be for blessing. Amen. Rena?
Balabusta. It's a Yiddish expression describing a good homemaker, generally referring to a woman who is exceptionally skilled at maintaining her home. This was Mom. Growing up, she was always cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, ironing, whatever that is, and taking care of her family. Mom was a beloved wife for almost 60 years to my father. She was a loving mother of 4 of us kids, Mark, Neil, Larry, and myself. She was a very proud bubbie of her 7 grandchildren, Arianna, Joshua, Daniel, Max, Elijah, Jeremy, and Zach. She was a dear sister of Irene, Esther, and Edythe, who we called Aunt Gicky, since my mom couldn't say Edythe as a kid. And that's what we called her. That's what she called her. She was a strong woman, both physically and spiritually. She was the youngest of 4 daughters and the last one of her generation. She lived in what we called, or what the family called, the building, where we grew up in West Rogers Park. We were on the 3rd floor, since my mom was the youngest one, and they made us walk up 3 flights of stairs. And then 2 of her sisters lived on the 1st and 2nd floors. When her sister Esther and family, who lived nearby, would come and visit, we were all together, and we felt like it was the Becker kibbutz. One time I remember my aunts coming upstairs for Thanksgiving in their winter coats to try and be funny, like they traveled from far away to be there. That was funny. I also remember my mom playing mahjong in the living room with my aunts every Monday night. I would try and go to sleep, and all I heard was 1 bam, 2 crack, right? And I knew it was just another family mahjong night. I have so many fond memories of growing up in the building. It was a wonderful way to grow up. Mom was a person of routine. She cooked for us daily. We had milchik on Mondays, fleischik on Tuesdays, and so on throughout the week. And on Friday night, we usually had brisket or chicken, and chicken soup, or meatballs, sweet and sour meatballs. And definitely cold cuts on Sunday with the whole family. When I cooked Mom's sweet and sour meatballs, which was the exact same recipe that she used, my kids would say, Bubbies were better.
Always.
And I realized the secret ingredient was bubbie. By the way, Mom, You should see the people who are here for you. You'd be so happy to see all of them. She always looked around and took inventory wherever we went, whether it was in synagogue or at some event. She was always, oh, look who's here, pointing her finger. It's almost like she was starstruck. So I guess all of you were the stars in her life. They say mother knows best. Well, my mom actually ended up knowing best, but just in this case. After I graduated college, she said, Rena, you should apply for a job opening at Solomon Schechter Day School. And I said, no way, I'm not going to work there. Well, guess what? Mom, I work at Solomon Schechter Day School now. She knew best. When us kids were old enough, she went to work as an office worker at Jewish Family Service in West Rogers Park, where she also served as office mom. She was a comfort to the people in the office there, as many came to her for guidance and advice. Mom loved her family, and it was always evident. Even though we did not live in a fancy home or have the best of everything, like the rabbi said, we felt like we had the best of everything. Mom and Dad worked hard to make sure we didn't miss out on what life had to offer. We never wanted for more. Shabbat dinners, family get-togethers, holidays, vacations, celebrations, and just living in the building kept us a close-knit and happy family. We had a loving home with all the necessities. Mom made sure of that. She taught us about shalom bayit, which means peace in the home. Every day, Mom and Dad kissed goodbye in the morning when leaving for work, and when they came home from work, they also kissed hello, and when they went to sleep. Even after some bickering, they made sure to end the day in peace. Shalom bayit. I can remember the one time when my dad was in the nursing home near the end, and my parents were bickering. I was there to drive my mom home that night. It was the one time I can remember that she was so upset with my dad, she didn't want to kiss him goodnight. And I reminded her about Shalom Bayit that she had taught me. And before we left the building, she went back and kissed him goodnight. Well, thank God she did, because the next day was the day my father passed away. So, Mom, thank you for teaching us about Shalom Bayit. Thank you for all you've taught us and given us and done for us. Your legacy is seen in the closeness of our family. You are very much loved by all of us and will be greatly missed. We love you.
Thank you, Rena and Arianna. Neil?
I think Mom waited until we could all be together to pass away. And that's how Mom wanted it. So we used to say Dad was the last of the Mohicans. But it was my mother who truly is the last of her generation, as Rena said. As human nature is, we tend to focus our remembrance on someone on the most recent aspect of their lives. In my mother's case, it was a very trying year and a half. With COVID raging, the facility in which she lived went to extreme measures to fight the virus. Around the country, nursing homes went into shutdown mode to protect the most vulnerable among us. Mom was not the exception. I believe if she didn't have dementia, she would have died of loneliness. We could not physically visit her. She was isolated and confined to her room in the form of a lockdown. Thank God for Zoom, where we could see her and try to communicate with her once a week for half an hour. As time went on, this became a one-way conversation as Mom's dementia got worse. It was still good to see her, but in reality, it became a platform for catching up with my siblings and family. I have to commend the staff of Lieberman, which at times, as you could imagine, was under tremendous strain and being short of staff, constantly adjusting to new guidelines of dealing with the virus. My mother, she was in the crosshairs. We thought we were going to lose her last year when she was diagnosed with COVID and was put in hospice. She got through it, thankfully. My biggest fear or regret was that she would die alone. As the dark clouds dissipated and things started to open up, we got word that they were allowing visitation. Half-an-hour visits once every 2 weeks, only 2 people allowed with full PPE. Hearing that Larry, Lisa, and Rena went a few times to visit, Liz and I decided it was time for a road trip from Sarasota to Chicago, with a few stops along the way. Our ultimate stop was the L&L Klaber Hotel. Initially, Liz and I were thinking of coming up for her birthday, which would have been July 1st. But circumstances and fate and a roulette wheel pushed that up by 3 weeks. Our preset meeting with Mom on a Friday afternoon was a sight Liz and I were not prepared for. As she sat in a wheelchair with her frail body, she stared into space. We held her hand and told her we loved her. I'll never know if that registered or not. I knew her days were numbered, and we would be back soon for the final chapter. A week and a half later, here we are again with accommodations at the L&L Klaber. Over the last few days, we've poured through treasure troves of pictures and videos of Mom's rich life. It is amazing how we forget things that happen over the course of one's lifetime, especially as we all get older. Mom, she lived a wonderful and enriched life, and she leaves a wonderful legacy. I'm grateful that Mom's final days, all the close family members were able to see her, along with Rabbi Weil, and that we are able to be together and have this beautiful tribute to her today. Shalom, Mom.
Thank you, Neil. Le'da hi reshit, uftira tachlit hachaim kamasahem, kahalicha kitzmicha mishalav v'shalav. Birth is a beginning, death a destination, but life a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. And now the journey, the 9-decade journey of Marcia Klaber has now come to its sad conclusion. And so, with Job, who knew no end of suffering, or it had an end actually, but Job who knew abundant suffering, in our sadness we cry out, Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lekach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken, blessed be the name of the eternal God. Into your care, O God, we entrust the spirit of Marcia Klaber. For you keep faith with your children in death as in life. Sustain us, O God, that we may meet with serenity the mysteries that lie ahead for us, knowing that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you, O God, will be with us, a loving friend in whom we put our trust. You, O God, are the light of our lives and our hope in eternity. Please now rise for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Tehorim, Kezohar Rakia Masirim, Et Nishmat, Masha Bat Asher Lemel V'chana, Shohalcha Le'olama, Ba'al Rachamim Yasireha, Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim, V'yitzror b'tzror ha'chaim et nishmata, Adonai hu nechalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar. Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence with the holy and the pure who shine like the glow of the heavens to Marcia Klaber, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence within the shadow of your wings. Let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say, Amen. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Waldheim Cemetery in Forest Park. The family will be returning to the residence of Larry and Lisa Klaber at 880 Indian Spring Lane here in Buffalo Grove. They'll be together today following the interment until 9 p.m., Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m., and the family requests only vaccinated people attend. So if you haven't been vaccinated twice, the full vaccination, please just call the family or Zoom a condolence. Memorial contributions in her memory to the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center or Hadassah, the Chicago chapter. That information is on the service folder, and for those of you who are online, all that information is on our website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend using your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as the pallbearers come forward and as we escort the casket of Marcia Klaber from the chapel. Pallbearers just going to follow Peggy.
Amor Ma'akra, Kohobasar Katsir, Bekokasto, Katsitsa Sadet, the Vase Katsir, Nadam Tea,
Folks, may return to your cars.